tutorial on how to use a sound font, and this is going to be going into Polyphone. So Polyphone is this software that you could get in order to manage and build your own sound fonts. Sound fonts are going to be these virtual instruments that you could play back in Musescore or MIDI sequencers. So they're different from VSTs, which are just a whole nother ballpark, but sound fonts are kind of in this format of SF2. They're kind of like an earlier or less complex version, just to be really crude about it, just a very basic way of doing playback with virtually sequenced pieces of music. That's kind of just like in layman's terms, but that's the basic gist of it. A sound font has all these instruments that are related to sound, to these samples of specific sounds. They can be recordings of instruments, they can be sound effects, whatnot. And you're going to be assigning these samples to instruments and specific pitches that you're going to be selecting once we start playing around with the sound font itself. So first we would actually open Polyphone, so which I have right now. This is what Polyphone will look like once you open it. And we're going to just hit new sound font, which I already did here. So we're just going to say test font. Maybe we'll put an A in front of it so it'll appear in our list of our files later on, so that's easier to spot. So test. Okay, the first thing you'll want to do is import your samples. So usually you could record .wav files from your phone using your voice recorder, so you can play your instrument and hit record, then play a note on your instrument. Usually I like playing a scale or an arpeggio throughout my instrument's range, so I'll go to the bottommost note and then play that note, and then I could do like a C major triad or something, just going up through the octaves until I get to the topmost limit of my instrument. So what you'll have after that, you'll have all these different samples for different pitches. So this is from a sound font I completed a long time ago. So for the tutorial, we're just going to copy them over. Once we open them using this button here, add a sample, and then we're going to go and actually just copy and paste it. So Control-C, Control-V, make sure that's highlighted. And then now we have all our samples in. So once we navigate through the samples portion of this, sorry, I feel my voice is kind of weird through the microphone. It's because I have a cold right now, so unfortunately the cold is going to make it sound a little bit weird, but hopefully we're able to get through this tutorial. Anyways, so now you have your samples that you've recorded, and you could trim them down using something like Audacity or another audio editor. And then you import them into Polyphone using this add a sample button. So once we've done that, now it's just going back and forth and assigning the pitches. So first, what I like to do is have a tuner app or something similar next to me, and I'll just go through these pitches, and for the most part I think they're correct. So for example, this note, that note right there, it's supposed to be middle C, so you could pull up this virtual keyboard, and we're going to just confirm that it's at middle C. Sometimes it'll recognize it automatically, but sometimes you have to change it down here. So the 60th key on the virtual keyboard will be middle C. That's going to be our tuning root key right down here. Just make sure that's correct. And everything else looks okay, except we need to make sure if it's a woodwind instrument, a brass instrument, or a bowed string instrument, that we select loop, because these instruments have a way of doing sustain that isn't done by tremolo or, plucking insanely fast, such as in a guitar or mandolin. these instruments that are wind instruments or bowed string instruments, you could have a looped or a sustained note. So in order to loop, we could either do it manually and just keep clicking back and forth, and this takes a tedious amount of time because you'll have this weird going back and forth if you accidentally click one of the valleys or the peaks, and then that's spliced, and that's a whole mess that you don't want to deal with. Well, there's a trick on how to solve that very easily, so let's go back to where we were. Oops, there we go. So now we're just going to select all of the samples, and then we could actually hit this toolbox, this handy dandy toolbox here, and we could actually auto loop. This will fix most of our problems, but of course it's best to always go back and check, so I would probably check something like here where the spectrograph has this weird dip just to make sure it's not messing up. Looks like it's messing up there, so we all have to just tweak this. I could possibly change this to make it a little bit shorter. Sometimes this won't load, so you just have to be patient. Usually I just hit the back button and I'll just play around. Maybe we make this 10. We don't want that loop in there, so maybe right here. What's nice is now you can go back and auto loop it after you've made that edit. You could always hit auto loop and then it should fix it for you. Let's see. We're close, but we could always just keep going back to that area where we keep shortening it, this red line, past that, until we get to the result we want. Probably somewhere around there, I would argue. Okay, so now we auto loop again. Alright, so we got rid of that little weird hump in that one, so that's good. Let's just move on to the next step, which will be selecting your samples and making an instrument. So that's basically just going excuse me. That's basically just going to be selecting all the samples available that you have an idea of making an instrument for. Let's say if I wanted to do like violin, viola, cello, double bass, and the recorder, and maybe a clarinet. So you could actually select specific ones and then make a specific instrument tied to those samples. So let's say if I had some cello samples in here that I'm using for my cello preset or my cello instrument, or I could select ones that I actually want. Let's say those were cello, so then I would select this, make a cello one, and then I could select all the other ones and then make my recorder one. But in this tutorial we're just dealing with a singular instrument we're trying to make into a sound font, which is a recorder that I recorded myself. Alrighty, so let's just call this recorder 1. And we want to make sure we link the selected samples. Okay, so now we get to this screen, which is a whole table of very scary looking things, but let's break it down. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is the root key. These are the notes that we set back up here, the sample root keys. So those are going to be determined up here when you're making sure your pitch matches. You know, you have a tuner, and then you could figure out from middle C is this black dot, and then how far out am I from middle C. So for example, this A5 is going to be key 81, and then when we go to our instruments, we go to that A5, which is going to have to scroll over here. We do have sample root key 81. Okay, the next thing we need to do is actually set our pitches for the key ranges. So the key ranges will determine, like, okay, so I'm going to use this sample, this middle C, for middle C up to the next sample. Or if your instrument has a range that you didn't just get a sample for, like you didn't record yourself playing below a middle C even though your instrument can play a middle C. This is where you would make those changes. You're telling the program, okay, assign these keys, these pitches on the keyboard to this sample. So whenever I play a middle C, let's say if I move this to key 59, now I get a B natural using that middle C, so it's going to be tuned down. So I don't think a recorder goes all the way down to this pitch right here, so we're going to have to edit this. Sometimes they'll have left and right samples. I forgot to mention that earlier. That's just stereo or mono. Usually you want to record in stereo. Oh wait, no, you want to record in mono. My bad, sorry. You want to record in mono. I accidentally recorded in stereo, but that's okay. We just have to change two things at once each time we're making an edit. Sorry about that. My cold is driving me nuts. Anyway, so the key range here. So let's see. I have this C right here. So the next note is an E4. So that's that note right there. Key 64 is an E note. An E4. So that means I could set this down from 60, which is going to be our starting point, because a tenor recorder can't play this B natural. Well, technically you could, so maybe we'll add that in. You could cover the bottom of the instrument to get that B natural. So 59, and then our next sample is at key 64. So therefore we'll do this first one for 59 to 63. Okay, so now we're just doing the process. We're just going to go from the previous and then add on right before our next sample. So this sample at E4, this 64 sample root key right here, we're going to need it to cover itself, so E4's key, which is 64, and then we also need to cover 66. We don't want to cover 67 because we'll be doubling up and we don't want that. So we're just going to do 64 to 66 on those, and then we're just going to go down the line. This sample root key here is 67, so we're going to do 67 to the next sample, which is for the key 72, so that means 67 to 71 on that one. Oops, I don't know why it disappeared. 67 to 71. That's not what I wanted. 67 to 71. Sorry about that. This next one will be going 72 to 75, because you look here, that's one below this next sample here for E5. So we need to make sure we get that E flat 5. So that's going to be 75. So the sample here, the C5 sample, will go from key 72, which is the sample root, all the way to key 75, which is right before our next sample at E5. So for C5, it will be 72 to 75. Okay, so now I'm just going to repeat the process over and over. 76 is E5 down here, right there. That's 76. So we want to go all the way until we hit 81. So that's going to be that key right there. It's an A, but we want to go one below it. So it's going to actually be 76 to 80 for our key range for this sample right here, the E5 sample. Next one is 81 to 83. And our final one here is 84 to 127. I just like putting the high range up here. You're not technically supposed to be able to hit all those notes, but, you know, just to round it up at the end of the day. So I'll put 84 and then 127, which is the maximum key range up here. Okay, so when I click all of these, notice they don't really double up other than being left and right. Again, if you record in mono, you don't have to do this double up thing. Since I recorded in stereo, like a goofball, I have to enter them twice by selecting both the columns and stuff like that. But usually you just have one for each sample, but here I messed up again. Goofball. I recorded in stereo instead of mono. Okay, so once we've gotten all of that out of the way, now again, if it's a wind instrument or bowed string instrument, you'll want to change the loop playback, and you'll want this second option. This is the one I used when I actually built it earlier. Yeah, you'll want that second option for everything. So just go on the global, and then for loop playback, you'll want that second option from the drop down. All of these you could mess around with too. These are for more complex things. So you have tuning and scale tuning, volume envy, delay, decay, sustain, all these good things for more advanced sound technicians out there and electronic musicians. So those are for like the advanced side of things. So we're just gonna now, once we have our instruments and we all have our key ranges set up, we have our loop playback. If we have an instrument that's able to sustain itself, again, a wind instrument or a bowed string instrument, also a brass instrument too. So we're just going to go and select our instrument here, recorder 1, and then we're going to select add a preset. Usually you could just create a new preset with the same name, and then you could link the selected instrument, so that's good. Okay, here you have the other options, again, all of these kind of fine-tuning things. So again, actual tuning, panning, decay, sustain, all those things. Those are more advanced modulators to mess around with. There's tons of other videos and tutorials to look up on those fronts. However, sometimes you could mess around with chorus and reverb. So chorus kind of is where you have multiple instruments playing at once, or multiple singers at once. All of them are going to be playing at a slightly different pitch. So if you say to a crowd of 1 million people, you say to them, okay, please sing me an A. All their A's are going to be slightly different. Let's say if I say to a crowd of trombonists, and play your middle C, play a middle C. And even though they're all playing middle C, there's going to be these fluctuations by a few cents here and there. So chorus will make that effect happen. So more chorus, less chorus. Reverb, of course, that's kind of like going to add a, this effect where it's like in a big room, if you want to add that kind of stuff here. Usually you don't add reverb and chorus to your Soundfont. You do that in your MIDI sequencer or your virtual instrument that you're going to be playing, or your general MIDI keyboard. All those things go into the actual mixing when we're going into Musescore and whatnot. Okay, so yeah, there's our Soundfont. Now all that we have to do is save it. So we're going to hit this button here, and we're going to just save it somewhere where Musescore could actually find it. And then once you see that like star symbol go away, that means you've saved it. So now all that's left is to open Musescore, find our Soundfont, and then start messing around with it. That's what we're going to be doing right now, so just please hang tight. Should be loading here in a bit. This Soundfont will be in SF2 format, so you can open it in anything that supports SF2 files. I just choose to use Musescore. We could also open it in, I think MIDI Sequencer also does that, so there's a website there called MIDI Sequencer. There's also, I don't know if this will work in Flat.io. Maybe you need Flat.io Premium, but anything that will accept SF2 format, you could open these Soundfonts in them. So let's go and just, you know what, let's just play on a piano. You could also use a tenor recorder. We recorded a tenor recorder, but just for this demo, it should work fine on piano. We just have to be knowledgeable about the range, because then we'll get to this issue where we don't have pitches assigned to certain keys, or we don't have samples assigned to certain keys, and that leads us to like silence. So we'll just do that. That's all good. I'll just say tutorial for Soundfonts, and then let's say Bach wrote this. He didn't write this. That's just a joke. Please don't come after me, classical music purist. I'm just making a funny joke. Alright, so now let's put some notes down. Why don't we do the Star Wars theme? So that's, I really hope Disney doesn't sue for this either. I'm just doing this as a tutorial. Please do not come after me. I do not own the rights to Star Wars song at all. I think I messed it up too, isn't it? An F to a D, I think it is. Gotta change to accidental. Something like that. Oh well. I'll just copy this multiple times. We'll do it in an octave below. And we'll just go back to, again, regular. Okay, so now we have our music here. Okay, so now we go into our mixer. So this is where we're going to be able to assign sound fonts, and then if you have VSTs, you could also assign them here in Musescore 4. Okay, so here's our sound font that we made in Polyphone. It's called a test sound font. All these other ones are just ones I found on the internet, on musical artifacts and whatnot, even on Musescore forums, some of them. Okay, recorder 1 is now selected as the sound. If we had more instruments in here, more presets, we could hit choose automatically, but you have to follow General MIDI's format. So if you hit choose automatically, if we had a trombone and let's say a xylophone and our recorder one in here, if I hit choose automatically, it's going to choose whichever one is closest to the piano's bank number and preset number notated by General MIDI. There's a list for all these General MIDI things online. You could play around with that later. But for now, we only have one instrument in our sound font here, so we're going to pick recorder. And so now it should magically sound like a recorder. Alright, there we go. So we turned our piano into a recorder. Cool magic trick there. Harry Houdini and all those other greats will be impressed, I bet. Merlin would be impressed with this magic trick. Okay, so something you might encounter with a sound font is this issue where after a while you hear silence, even though they have these sustained whole notes here, a very long sustained pitch. However, you won't hear any disturbances or clipping. You won't hear any of that if you looped it correctly. That's why I suggest using auto loop when you have an instrument that could do sustained pitches. You could use auto loop and you won't have any disturbance. You hear how smooth that is? Okay, so we went through checking the sustained notes. We went through changing to the sound font that we built in the software, the Polyphone software. So now let's talk about the silences that you might hear. So let's say if I play out of range. Let's make this bass clef, why don't we? Okay, so let's say I have this down here in bass clef. However, my recorder sound font doesn't go that far. Remember, our lowest note is a B natural. We can't go lower than a B natural. So that's our lowest note right there. If I keep going down, we won't hear anything because there isn't a sample assigned to that pitch. We didn't define that key or that pitch here using a sample in Polyphone. So that's why right now we'll get silence if we play this low part. However, if we are in range, let's copy that and move it into treble clef. If we are in range, so like right now, we are in range. However, if we keep going up, the same thing will happen. Except this sound font, we again put the limit all the way up as possible, so we won't actually run into that issue. But that's another reason why your sound font might be silent. See, that's in range of the instrument. It sounds bad because, again, this was kind of a quick and messy approach to clipping and all that and trimming the samples, but could kind of smooth it out using some reverb. So yeah, that's how you use a sound font. That's how you build a sound font from samples using Polyphone, and then playing and messing around with the sound font in Musescore. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful, and hope you use this knowledge to make some cool music, and you're able to share it with more people. Alrighty, thank you so much for tuning in. Please do something nice for someone, and catch you all soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.